That's up first. After 12:30, CBC recently reported on a case of botched cosmetic procedures. We'll talk about their rising popularity and the precautions you can take. Plus, another MLA leaves the BC Conservative caucus. We'll hear all about Amelia Boultbee's announcement coming up at 12:50. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Our top story. The city of Richmond says a recent BC Supreme Court ruling granting Aboriginal rights and title over some land in Richmond will negatively impact property values in the area. The city sent out letters to landowners in a 7.5-kilometer area in southeast Richmond, alerting them to an upcoming session on October 28th. Mayor Malcolm Brodie spoke with the Early Edition this morning and said that this case is the most consequential court decision in the city's history.
What the judgment did was say that that the titles to freehold property, to fee simple property, was affected by Aboriginal title. So to say that those parcels are unaffected, they are deeply affected and at the very least tossed into turmoil because as we go through an appeal for a couple of years and then on to the Supreme Court of Canada for a few more years, those parcels are essentially frozen. I can say that if you were looking for a piece of property, looking for a home, you would not consider buying a property where you knew that there was not only fee simple title, but also a declaration of Aboriginal title against that land. The situation has to be clarified, and frankly, the ruling of the court has to be overturned.
That's Malcolm Brodie, the mayor of Richmond. Now, the court decision concluded Canada's longest trial at 513 days. Justice Barbara Young says the court did not seek to invalidate private land rights, but her decision seeks to make the federal and city government title in the area invalid. Well, we're taking your calls. What are your questions about the Cowichan Tribes land decision? We'll take your calls in a few moments. Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. We are also live on TikTok. My first guest is Robert Morales. He's the chief negotiator of the Hul'qumi'num Treaty Group and a member of the Cowichan Tribes. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
The ruling found that the Cowichan have land rights in that section of Richmond, as well as fishing rights in the south arm of the Fraser River. What will this mean for the Cowichan Tribes moving forward?
Well, in regard to this specific site, I think it means that the Cowichan nations, which includes the Hul'qumi'num nations as part of that group, will have the opportunity to sit down with Canada and British Columbia to negotiate a resolution to this issue. For now, they have a declaration of title and a court ruling with regard to how the court is viewing how this issue should move forward. So I think it puts those nations in a position to be able to deal with the issue of what are the land rights of Indigenous peoples when government has granted away those rights or those lands in what is now called a fee simple.
What are your thoughts on these concerns that have been raised by the mayor of Richmond, saying that this raises questions around private property rights and how those homeowners might be impacted?
Well, I would start by saying that this decision is consistent with especially international law. So the Hul'qumi'num Treaty Group did go to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights with regard to this issue. What are the property rights of Indigenous peoples when the government has chosen to grant those lands away, we say unlawfully, to private fee simple or private property interests? The international law states that Indigenous peoples' right to territorial property must have legal certainty. And I think that that's really what this judge has provided is legal certainty with regard to these two conflicting forms of title. Um, Aboriginal title predates the issuance of a fee simple title. Now, we have been disputing this for a very long time, um, and the government has been aware of this issue for a very long time. In fact, the Hul'qumi'num Treaty Group wanted to negotiate the issue of Flectinus through the BC treaty process, but government refused. So the nations had no choice but to go to the courts to try and get a resolution. Um, Government has not been prepared to engage with the Hul'qumi'num nations in particular with regard to this issue. 90% or 85% of our territory was granted away to private landowners or to private interests, especially corporate interests. Hul'qumi'num nations have said that they do not want to displace the ordinary British Columbian who owns a home or a piece of property uh, within the territory. But corporate interests and governmental interests are a different story. So, they are not private citizens as such, and the Hul'qumi'num nations certainly want their interest in legal interest in those lands. These are legal interests. I think that that's something that isn't really acknowledged by those who are in opposition. Um, Aboriginal title has been confirmed by the Supreme Court of Canada as a legal interest in land. And so, if they have a legal interest in land, the judge went through and found that, in fact, government overstepped their constitutional authority by granting a private fee simple title over the top of the Cowichan Nation's Aboriginal title without any kind of consultation or resolution.
And so,
We have been calling on the government to resolve this issue for a very long time.
and so there will be these negotiations. In practical terms, what should the private fee simple landowners be preparing themselves for?
Well, if you're talking about small homeowners, I would expect that there will be a discussion about how will this get resolved. The government of British Columbia and the government of Canada have the obligation to represent their legal interests. There's another case coming from the East Coast, from New Brunswick, called the Wolastoqey Nation. And the judge there in their provincial court came to the same conclusion that the issuance of a fee simple title does not extinguish Aboriginal title. So we have a judgment from both sides of this country coming to the same conclusion. We also have international court judgments coming to the same conclusion. So it is the responsibility of government to deal with this issue. You cannot simply, I say, expropriate or steal or, take Indigenous people's lands and feel that, you have the right to do whatever you please. So I think this is.
My apologies.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to jump in, Mr. Morales, but I'm sure you can appreciate the uncertainty and the anxiety that these homeowners may have at this point. So I'm wondering what you can say to them, or what they should be expecting, what they can expect will be asked of them or will be imposed on them.
Well, at this point, I don't think that they need to be in a position of fear. The nations have said that they're not interested in, reasserting their occupation of those lands that are owned by private citizens. Now, the city of Richmond is a different situation. The government of Canada and the government of British Columbia, if they have legal interests or fee simples in those lands, that's a different story. I think corporations are in a different position than private citizens. So private citizens we're not interested in dislocating them. We've said that for many years now.
Very much appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Robert Morales is the chief negotiator of the Hul'qumi'num Treaty Group and a member of the Cowichan Tribes. We are taking your calls on this. What are your questions about the BC Supreme Court decision in August that ruled that the Cowichan Tribes have Aboriginal title over a 7.5-kilometer section of land in Richmond? The city of Richmond has just sent a letter to a number of residents in that area, warning them about what this could mean for their property rights. There's a meeting to be held October 28th. Our number is 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. And you can also leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Before I go to our first caller, I'm joined now by Merle Alexander, an Indigenous resource lawyer based in Victoria, and he co-drafted BC's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act and is a member of the Kitasu Heheis First Nation. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Happy to be with you.
What to you is the central issue following this court ruling in August?
I mean, I think the central issue is something that previous person, Robert Morales, has touched on, which is that this legal certainty that is proposed by the BC court on these Aboriginal title issues is intended to be negotiated between the respective governments. So that being the BC government, Canadian government, and of course the Cowichan Nation. So I mean, to me, that's the most important, is that the court has provided a path forward and is, on the whole, just affirming like what Canadian law has already affirmed, which is that Aboriginal title and fee simple interest can coexist. We just need to create like a negotiated framework, which has already been achieved, I think, like in British Columbia, on several occasions, like both the Cowichan Nation, who had a declaration of Aboriginal title, and the Haida Nation where they had really strong evidence of Aboriginal title to Haida Gwaii. In both of those circumstances, the BC and Canadian governments negotiated language in a government-to-government agreement that provided legal certainty for all land interests, including fee simple ownership in those areas.
And so when we hear about the negotiations that need to take place, right now it's in an appeal. This case is undergoing an appeal. So how likely is that negotiation to take place? In the following the example of the Silcotin and the Haida.
Well, I guess we have to hope that it doesn't take the amount of time that it took with the Haida and Cowichan, because in those circumstances, those are decade-long uncertainty that, like, over those geographic areas. And I think given the complexity of the land interests, I think like it is obviously this case is like a watershed case in that, and that there's a grant of Aboriginal title in a very highly developed urban setting. So I think that really sets apart this case. In some ways, I think also encourages the urgency of addressing the issues. And I think, there already are negotiated models that have worked. And those same models, I think, can exist here. I don't think that the solution is to further litigate, because I think there's a real risk in that legal strategy, and that if the BC government if the BC Court of Appeal further elaborates on this lower court decision, then it will become binding law throughout British Columbia. And I think that's the real risk of the current BC government strategy, to just appeal the case. Maybe that's also what's causing the the fear, I think, that the mayor of Richmond's letter seems to speak to.
My guest is Merle Alexander, who's an Indigenous resource lawyer based in Victoria. He co-drafted BC's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, a member of the Kitasoo First Nation. And let's go to your calls now, your questions on the decision, the court ruling regarding the Cowichan Tribes and Aboriginal title over a section of land in Richmond. Roman is calling us from Nanaimo. Hi, Roman, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for calling in. What are your questions or your thoughts on this?
The main question goes to everyone, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, legal, political, everyone. Is this not a wonderful opportunity and not a fear-based crisis or threat? A wonderful opportunity to engage reconciliation at all levels as much as possible? Because reconciliation also means establishing what is known versus what is unknown, and learning how to cooperatively create a new future scenario together, rather than this NIMBYism, not in my backyard, based on ownership and the colonial construct of title and land and deeds. Isn't that an opportunity to engage the process head on?
Roman, a very good question. And we, in fact, have a lawyer here who was involved in DRIPA here in BC. You mentioned, Merle, that it may be the question of this appeal, right? The BC government and other parties, Richmond as well, appealing that may be throwing more uncertainty into it. How concerned are you that this takes away from that process, that reconciliation process, because there's an appeal and there is that fear from some that we've heard about in Richmond?
Yeah, I mean, litigation is always like a bit of a, like, especially in this setting, is always a vicious cycle. I mean, in the end, like, even if the BC Court of Appeal elaborates on the decision, the BC government and the Canadian government will very likely be still sent back to negotiate with the Cowichan Nation. So we're really just prolonging or delaying an inevitable. So I mean, I do really very much agree with like the question that this is actually a really tremendous opportunity to bring greater legal certainty. It's an opportunity to do it in a more complicated environment, like in a highly developed urban environment. But the precedent that will be of a negotiated solution to this could then be potentially exported or applied throughout the province. And at the end of the day, I think what all British Columbians, what First Nations, like what Canadians want is to see greater legal certainty and have these issues addressed squarely. I don't think that further appealing the case and continuing to elevate an adversarial process is what the Cowichan Nation wants. And strangely, it does seem to be what the city of Richmond and in the BC government seem to want.
Let's take another call here now. Cam at Cobble Hill. Hi, Cam. What are your questions about this decision?
Well, one thing I think is never brought up, and I've complained to CBC about it constantly, I'll probably get cut off, is how much does Cowichan Band receive from all levels of government and funding? We always hear what Indigenous people don't get. Let's start hearing what they do get, because we're giving away, it's just so much, one thing after another, and it, like, never hear where the money's going.
When it comes to the land decision itself, what are your questions?
Well, I think it's a scary precedent. It happened in Queen Charlotte Islands, it's happening here, and I think it's fouling up our province. Even if you ask all these resource-based companies, is Indigenous stuff putting a wrench in everything? And it is, but they won't admit it. I've had to deal with this, and it's just a can of worms.
Cam, thank you for the call. So the question there around, I'll let you, Merle, respond if you like to his first point there about funding.
I mean, I don't have the answer to that. I'm sure that's all publicly like available information about what potential funding transfers are. But I mean, obviously, the Cowichan Nation, like all First Nations throughout Canada, all Indigenous people in Canada, are receiving governments that are like funding that's equivalent of what a municipality might achieve. So I mean, I don't think that's that might in the end be part of the negotiated solution, is that for this very particular select a geographic area, it may be that part of the future solution may be that the Cowichan Nation would be the appropriate taxing authority. Of course, right now the city of Richmond taxes its fee simple owners, its business owners. It taxes even crown agencies like the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. They all pay a certain amount of taxes. It may in the end be part of the sort of accommodation solution that governments will withdraw from that taxing authority, and the Cowichan Nation itself would become like the taxing authority. But I mean, obviously, issues around like funding, in some ways, really just fuel. I think one of the dangerous elements of the letter that was sent this weekend by the mayor of Richmond is that it really feeds into a degree of racism, a lot of misinformation, and also I think takes a very complex constitutional issues and then puts them into the public domain. And the truth is, like, lawyers or Indigenous or non-Indigenous, these are very complex issues, which is why, like, at the end of the day, the courts have consistently repeated the same wisdom, that these issues are complex and need to be negotiated, not litigated.
I very much appreciate your explanation and careful thought on this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Merle Alexander is an Indigenous resource lawyer based in Victoria. He co-drafted BC's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act and is a member of the Kitasu Hehes First Nation. Our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca. And we have a few emails on this right now. Scott writes us from Burnaby, the Cowichan land title ruling doesn't have to be a fight. Instead of appealing, governments could explore the idea that all land is both Crown land and Indigenous title land, not one or the other. Indigenous titles shouldn't be separated or limited by Crown declarations. There's room here for shared stewardship that honors both legal traditions instead of another round of courtroom resistance. And we have another email here from Joanne in Victoria, who writes, as an Indigenous person, my comment is this is another example of the truth coming out about the history of Indigenous history. Missing children, rights entitled tied up in courts for decades, true history of Indigenous peoples after 150 years being taught. The truth of the matter is the land was stolen, and this has been proven case over case in the highest court of the land. There needs to be a resolution, while at the same time, colonization of Canada has blatantly ignored the First Peoples' ownership of the land. These were never signed away by ancestors. Thank you, Joanne, for your email as well. Our address is bctoday@cbc.ca. It's 12:30 now. You're with BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. Coming up in our next half hour, we're going to talk about the rise in prevalence of cosmetic surgery. CBC recently reported about Botox and filler procedure that went wrong, and we're going to take your calls on what precautions you can take, and as well your thoughts on why it has become so common. So we'll have that conversation coming up. And in about 20 minutes as well, more on another MLA leaving the BC Conservative Caucus. Our provincial affairs reporter, Katie DeRosa, will be with us. Right now it is time for a CBC News Update. And here is Stephanie Mercier.
Good afternoon. In the news, the BC Conservative Party is down another MLA. Penticton-Summerland MLA Amelia Boultbee announced this morning she is leaving the party and will sit as an independent. Boultbee says she no longer has faith in John Rustad's leadership. Unionized workers with the Fraser-Fort George Regional District in northern BC have ramped up job action. Members of QB Local 1699 have started rotating strikes at landfills and transfer stations in Prince George, Mackenzie, and Valemount. The union says regular services will resume tomorrow, with future picket locations posted on its website. And BC's homicide team says a 24-year-old man is now facing a first-degree murder charge in connection with the death of another man a year and a half ago. In January of 2024, a 21-year-old man was found badly hurt in Coquitlam. He later died. Terrell O'Hearn has been charged with first-degree murder and remains in custody. That's a look at the BC News. Turning now to the weather for the province. Along the north coast, rainy today with gusty winds for coastal areas, a high of 11. For the Peace region, a mix of sun and cloud with a chance of afternoon showers, a high of 8 degrees. For the central interior, mainly cloudy, a chance of showers this afternoon, up to 8. For the southeast, sunshine, some afternoon clouds and a high of 10. For the southern interior, also clouds and showers with a high of 11. And for the south coast, clouds and showers with a high today of 13 degrees. Now back to BC Today with Michelle Elliott.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
It's been a little while. We should hang out on the weekends here, probably, is what I should do.
That's right. Come by and visit.
Keep that in mind if I want a knitted sweater or something.
I will definitely be the right person to talk to.
You are the go-to. That's Stephanie Mercier making a special appearance here from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You know her very well if you're tune into us on the weekend, of course. Welcome back to BC Today. This is our lunchtime show, of course. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for being with us. And we're going to talk now about cosmetic procedures. If you are on social media at all, I'm sure you've seen signs of just how prevalent cosmetic procedures have become. Many celebrities, for example, either talk about it or if there have been discussions around procedures that they've had. Kris Jenner's been in the news lately. These procedures, though, can go wrong. CBC recently reported about a pair of sisters accused of administering Botox and filler without a license. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of BC has filed a petition for an injunction against the sisters, and that's after one particular injection to increase the size of a patient's buttocks went badly, according to court documents obtained by the CBC. The allegations have not yet been tested in court, and the sisters have not responded to CBC or in court. Well, we are talking about the prevalence and the precautions needed around cosmetic procedures. Have you pursued it yourself? How do you stay safe? And what are your questions about cosmetic procedures? What have you always wanted to know about them? And if you have any thoughts around the rise in popularity as well, you can share them with us. Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. If you are joining us on TikTok, you can leave your comment there. My guest is Dr. Monica Lee, a cosmetic and medical dermatologist based in Vancouver. Good afternoon, Dr. Lee. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me.
From your perspective, just how much more common are procedures like fillers or Botox?
Well, in the last several decades, there's really been a surge and interest in non-surgical, minimally invasive treatments, and that falls within the realm of injectables, like the ones you mentioned. And Botox is a brand name, but it's a category that's a neuromodulator treatment. So it's a medication we put into the muscle so that we can relax its contraction, and thereby, lines and wrinkles can be softened. And then when you're thinking about fillers or talking about fillers, these are as well drugs that we inject to help lift, help volumize, to improve hydration. And so there's really a surge in interest when, a lot of us are looking at treatments to age gracefully. Sometimes there's more of us that might be staying in the workforce longer. And so there is this motivation to kind of rejuvenate the face. So there's many reasons and many motivations that drive consumers to these treatments.
What are some things people need to keep in mind in order to stay safe?
it's really important to make sure you understand and know the credentials and the experiences of individuals who are administering these medical procedures, even though they are elective and they're cosmetic in nature. Ultimately, these are still medical treatments where there can be side effects and complications that can arise. And so someone's, medical training, as well as their experiences in being not only able to administer the procedures, but if there is a side effect or an adverse outcome, that they are equipped and they are knowledgeable in being able to address those concerns if they arise in a patient.
What are the concerns? What are some of the things that can go wrong?
Well, when we think about any cosmetic injectables, because they puncture the skin, then common effects that can occur would include things like, potential bruising. Someone might get a little bit of bleeding. There could be a little bit of transient discomfort with the treatment. Sometimes there could be a little bit of asymmetry or a little bit of bumpiness that could be improved or massaged out or corrected. But there's also potential really devastating side effects, such as, infection, whether it's localized or becomes systemic. But with dermal filler treatments, because the treatment itself involves a gel-like material or some sort of material that's injected into the skin and into the deeper layers of the skin, there can be even risk such as stroke, blindness, and skin breakdown or skin necrosis.
Wow, that's pretty frightening.
Certainly, it's these are medical treatments, as I mentioned earlier, that really requires someone's expertise and experience and training, and proper training that's ongoing for physicians, really lifelong, and healthcare providers, so that we ensure that not only are we getting good results for patient, but things are safe.
And so, how concerned are you then that people are perhaps just going on social media, or just not doing those checks and balances, perhaps even traveling out of the country seeking these procedures?
Well, when it comes to the fact that there are, interests in maybe medical tourism or some of these treatments outside of Canada, the issue is that, first of all, there might be use of products and medications that are not approved by Health Canada that might be available elsewhere. And so, is the safety and the efficacy of particularly those products, have they been evaluated with the same rigor as what it would be done in our country? That's something that is uncertain. And then, as I mentioned earlier, because there could be potential side effects and poor outcomes that could be linked with these treatments, it's good to be able to follow up with the individual, the healthcare professional who is delivering the treatment. And if it was done outside the country, then that follow-up can be a little bit difficult to arrange, especially if there are multiple visits involved should something adverse occurs. So those are some of the considerations. When you're talking about social media, there can be, as we know, not just in medicine or with procedures, there can be misinformation or information that's not entirely true. And I appreciate that for a consumer, it can be difficult to kind of decipher what out there in social media is the truth or partially the truth, or maybe it's not the truth at all. And so, it's really important to, if someone is interested in some of these treatments, maybe the first step is actually to speak with their family physician or a trusted healthcare provider and get some guidance as to even who to go to ensure that this first step is met before proceeding with treatments.
My guest is Dr. Monica Lee, a Vancouver-based cosmetic and medical dermatologist. And we are taking your calls. If you've pursued cosmetic procedures yourself, let us know what steps you took in order to stay safe. What are your own questions about it? And what do you think of their rise in popularity? Our numbers again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Taking your emails to bctoday@cbc.ca, or you can leave a comment on social media, on our TikTok Live. Rob is joining us from Vancouver. Hi, Rob. Yeah, what are your thoughts on cosmetic procedures?
My thoughts are that, unfortunately, humans are superficial and we judge people based on their appearance. So, you know, in the case when someone needs something reconstructive to look, you know, quote unquote normal within the bell curve, or if people are born with defects, I'm in support of that, because unfortunately that could be a real barrier to people getting jobs or, you know, having friendships, relationships, whatever. But other than that, I mostly think, you know, the vast majority of people that get these traditionally are still women. And I think that's because of the patriarchy of thousands of years of a culture that has told women traditionally they can't do things that men can do, and their value is based on how they appear and if they are pleasing in appearance to men. And this is why in Hollywood, male actors can get roles and get cast well into their 70s, 80s, and women can't when they stop looking young. So I think this is something we should be pushing back on. And if there is a big increase in it, I'm sure it's mostly women, and that is a step backward. This is putting too much emphasis on your physical appearance, and this is letting that patriarchal, sexist norm continue unabated. And I used to go to a medical clinic, and the doctors there, they were doing medical work. They also ran a Botox clinic. So you're sitting there, people are going in because they have a medical reason, and they're getting promoted and pumped. You know, you should be getting Botox so you don't have wrinkles, which I think should not be allowed. I want to have a separation. I don't think women should go to their doctor for a medical reason and get told, you shouldn't have wrinkles.
Let me ask that question. I don't know if that does happen, but I take your point about the patriarchy.
It does happen.
Question.
It used to happen at my medical clinic.
Okay, Rob, thank you very much. Yeah, okay, thank you for the call. I'm sorry to jump in. I just want to make sure I get a response here from Dr. Lee. First of all, does that happen? Are people being encouraged to get cosmetic procedures if they go in for a medical procedure?
Well, thanks, Rob, for your comments, and they're quite insightful. So thank you for that. You know, I think it really depends on the way the clinic is set up. I mean, I'm a board-certified dermatologist, and my colleagues and I, certainly, we are not pressuring our patients if we're seeing them for medical reasons. I mean, lots of times I do see patients bring up the topic of, you know, maybe uneven skin tone or lines and bumps that they don't like that are benign. And it's something that has bothered them for whatever reason, for whatever motivations. And if that's the case, I'm happy to provide education and details about what that would involve. But certainly it really depends on the physician and how they set up their clinic. But that's not in keeping with myself or the colleagues that I know of that practice dermatology.
Yes, and do you have any thoughts about that pressure that, as he said, you know, it lies on women because of, you know, decades of the patriarchy?
You know, that's an interesting comment, and certainly I see where your perspective is. I think the flip side is that we're actually seeing some shifts, and, you know, women at different ages being celebrated. I'm thinking about recently, you know, with some of the movie awards, you know, Michelle Yeoh, who is a woman in, I believe, her 60s, and there's other actresses now out there who are being recognized for their work and getting roles in Hollywood that are, you know, over 50 years old. So I do think that is shifting. like you mentioned, Rob, earlier, that there are different reasons why individuals, men or women, seek treatment. Because sometimes that they feel, they don't feel the age that they're in, that they feel younger at heart. They want to look younger because they are so very active. So that's one reason. Other reasons could be, a competitive edge when they're in the workforce. Sometimes people come in and they've never explored cosmetic treatments, but their daughters and their sons are getting married, or they have a niece and nephew that has a special event, and so they want to look more refreshed. So I wouldn't, for me, I think, I practice both medical and cosmetic dermatology, as Michelle was mentioning earlier. I think these are all within a spectrum, and if things are done in moderation and it's safe and there's education involved so that an individual could make a conscientious, informed choice, then I think these treatments offer options for individuals, about self-care, really.
Dr. Monica Lee is joining me, cosmetic and medical dermatologist, to speak about the bigger cultural factors in the rise of these procedures. I did speak with a sociologist earlier today. Jordan Foster is assistant professor in the sociology department at MacEwan University.
Now, we live in a very, visually obsessed culture, and we also live in an increasingly virtual culture. And these things are intimately related to one another. So in virtual environments, most of us are called forward to present ourselves, right? To make our physical appearance highly visible, and we're often rewarded for doing that, right? We're rewarded in the form of things like likes and comments online. And this is not unfamiliar to young people who are, again, deeply invested in these platforms. Adding to this, we see, this very highly visible celebrity culture and the rise of figures like micro-celebrities on social media platforms. All this to say, we are exposed to representations of beauty with, very significant frequency, and we ourselves are called forward to participate in this highly visual and virtual culture where being beautiful matters and where it can return significant rewards. This shapes our understanding of what it means to be beautiful for the young people I speak with. The beauty ideal today is actually very much informed by augmentation. And many young people, at least in my research, sort of suggest that, without some amount of augmentation, you really can't hit today's beauty ideal. And that's a really challenging standard for young people to meet, right? To understand on the one hand that this is an ideal very much informed by some sort of augmentation or an intensive procedure, and on the other, to be in a position where we probably can't afford to keep up with that kind of standard, where we cannot, be going to get Botox or be investing in dermal fillers, which are hundreds of dollars, right, per syringe.
Well, and what about even just the very rigid framework of what it means to be beautiful? I mean, what does that mean for diversity and just how different people look?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. It's something that's come up in, focus group conversations with young people. And what we hear a lot of the time is that not only is this beauty ideal one that prices people out, so there's an element here of class inequality, right? Certain people cannot afford to keep up with the beauty ideal. There is a highly racialized and gendered element to the beauty ideal. So gender, of course, when we have that conversation, we know that beauty ideals have always sort of disproportionately weighed on women. That is changing a little bit, and young people, share as much with us that this is something that young men are also beginning to feel the weight of. But they do sort of spell out for us that this is also an ideal that has been informed by a kind of co-optation or appropriation of certain racialized aesthetics. And yet, it is not an ideal that welcomes many diverse people. And what they mean by that in practice is that, features stereotypically associated with Blackness, so full hips, for example, or full lips, are something that very much are a part of today's beauty ideal, right? And yet the women who are sort of most celebrated for embodying that ideal tend to be racially ambiguous or white presenting. So that means that women who are more diverse are actually sort of locked out of the beauty ideal, even though features they may possess inform how we understand beauty. So this is something that is not necessarily inclusive, and it's not inclusive along the lines of class, and it's not inclusive along the lines of race.
How do you balance the fact that it is, as you mentioned, it's becoming more common and quite prevalent in society, and people have the right and to choose these procedures. How do you balance that with those concerns that you've just raised?
It's a tricky balance. I mean, on the one hand, beauty and processes of beautification, whether that's applying, a skincare product or receiving a kind of treatment that's more intensive, can be a source of liberation, empowerment, joy, excitement. I mean, many people feel more beautiful when they engage in beauty practices. They feel more confident as a result. And that's not a bad thing. But we do need to be critical and conscientious of the lengths that we're willing to go to entertain this ideal, especially because beauty ideals are things that are shifting, right? And we are always going to be invested in a market that is very much, propelled by a narrative where we lack and we need to improve and work on the self and invest more heavily. And, in today's sort of market or beauty market, that's sort of first and foremost, is that we lack, something needs to be remedied or fixed. It's a really hard line to toe, but that would be my suggestion, is to be, to not necessarily feel bad or wrong because you want to participate in the beauty market, right? We have a very powerful industry that invites you to do so, but to be critical and conscientious of, what we're buying, both in terms of like the messages we're buying into and the products and procedures we're investing in.
That's Jordan Foster, assistant professor at the sociology department at MacEwan University. Dr. Lee, some interesting questions there. It is certainly rising in popularity, and interesting to think about the context that we need to bear in mind.
Absolutely. And Dr. Foster was correct and it can be a challenge. But I think as a dermatologist, I approach it with education, with providing information so that a consumer or an individual can make an informed choice. And then essentially kind of balancing, motivations, goals, values, perspectives, budget, to find the right individualized management or treatment plan for the individual.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me.
Dr. Monica Lee is a cosmetic and medical dermatologist in Vancouver. It's 12:52 now. You're with BC Today. Thanks so much for joining us. Tonight, it is do or die for both the Toronto Blue Jays and the Seattle Mariners. After tying the score last night with a 6-2 win against the Mariners, one more victory stands in the way of Toronto getting a chance at the World Series.
Popped up. Clement is there. And there will be a surge, allowed 2 runs on 6.
Another stellar performance from rookie pitcher Troy Savage last night. In a momentous comeback, the Jays were firing on all cylinders, defense, pitching, and hitting. It has been 32 years since the Jays last reached and won the World Series. Tonight, they are counting on a 7th heaven victory at Rogers Centre, the 7th and deciding game. You can catch it at 5 p.m. Pacific.
Here tonight, you just can't say enough about someone so young and so early in their major league career to come out.
And we wrap the show with provincial politics now. This morning, BC Conservative MLA Amelia Boultbee announced she is quitting the Conservative Party caucus. She's also calling on leader John Rustad to resign. She'll sit as an independent and says she'll collaborate with now former Conservative MLA Eleanor Sturcombe. CBC reporter Katie DeRosa is following this today. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Michelle.
So what can you tell us about Boultbee's decision and what led to it?
Well, Amelia Boultbee is now the 5th MLA to either be kicked out or leave the BC Conservatives. So that leaves the Conservatives with 39 seats, down from 44. Amelia is calling on Rustad to resign, saying that John Rustad is unraveling. She feels that he doesn't have the trust of his MLAs, and she just couldn't stay in the party any longer. And here's a bit of what she had to say about why she's leaving.
He has invited me to get the F out if I don't like it, and I've taken him up on that offer, and I suggest you do too. He told this caucus to their face that he doesn't respect them, and in my mind, that's reason enough to leave. This is not a matter of subpar performance. This is a matter of integrity. John has shown that he has no problem being unethical to cling onto power. He believes that the means justify the ends, and he is willing to resort to intimidation.
So, as you mentioned, we don't know that she's going to join in a new party with Eleanor Sturcombe, but now we have one BC, which is to the right of the BC Conservatives. We have three former Conservatives, now independents. So really, it's a question of how John Rustad is going to keep this Big Tent party together.
So what does John Rustad have to say?
Well, Rustad accused Amelia Boultbee of being the leak. We know that last week Rustad admitted to searching MLA's phones after allegations that he made that MLAs were leaking information or someone was leaking information from a caucus meeting. So here's what he had to say about Amelia.
To do with the future, she decided that she wasn't interested in doing that. It's also unfortunate that we have from 4 different sources, including somebody who's working with the NDP side, who says, what's going on with your MLA in Penticton? She's leaking everything to everyone. And obviously, those leaks can't carry on. And so it's something that I was planning to have a conversation with her about.
Certainly always dramatic, and we'll watch to see what comes next of this developing story. Katie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
That's CBC's provincial affairs reporter Katie DeRosa. Much more on this story, of course, a 5th MLA now leaving the BC Conservative caucus. You'll hear more throughout the day here on CBC.